The 1980s were a pivotal decade for theatrically released animated features. Disney, which had historically dominated the cartoon space, was going through a period now known as the Dark Ages, where their animated feature films weren't receiving the same positive critical or financial reception as they had in the past. This led to a number of other studios looking to fill the public need for new animations. Companies such as Don Bluth Productions, Warner Brothers, and 20th Century Fox Animation tried their hands at appeasing audiences' cartoon cravings. And though success was spotty, there were still enough instances to entice smaller studios to try their hand at producing animated movies of their own. This wasn't limited to just US companies either. Foreign entities also were attempting to create and distribute their films in the US, hoping for their own hit films to catch on with audiences. One of the more overlooked films to fit into this category is the 1991 movie The Princess and the Goblin. A joint production from studios in Hungary and Wales, the first animated movie from the latter in fact, was based on the 1872 novel by George MacDonald. Released in the United States in 1994, the film promised a captivating tale of a princess and a pauper saving their kingdom from a race of evil goblins who are bent on emerging from the underground and overthrowing the king and his people. The movie had seemingly checked all the boxes on what previously adored films of its kind had done. It was a musical that looked to have excellent animation, charming leads, a cute sidekick, and a comical, yet threatening villain. The film would tragically end up as a commercial failure, but was that more due to the Disney-biased moviegoers had carried with them for decades, or was the movie justly ignored? Its enticing characteristics little more than window dressing on a deeply flawed production. It had everything needed to be the ultimate fantasy film. So let's see if it is in fact. This is The Princess and the Goblin. The film opens on a beautiful, foggy landscape, traversing through a perfectly dark and spooky atmospheric forest before zooming in on a picturesque cliffside castle. It's beautiful, and a reverential throwback to the 1930s and 1940s era of handcrafted works of art that backgrounds would be. We get the king narrating saying he wasn't aware of the peril he had left his daughter Princess Irene in, as he and his knights ride off into the hills. We come upon the nanny, searching for Princess Irene, falling asleep shortly after, while Princess Irene and her cat Turnip play in the woods. I like Turnip. He's Irene's silent companion, which isn't as common as one might think in animated films, a sidekick that doesn't talk. But it's a refreshing change, his nonverbal communication being noticeable from the constant quipping of modern-day sidekicks, focusing only on his actions and adorable expressions. Irene and Turnip chase a butterfly into a mound of rocks, and we get to see it at an angle we don't normally get a viewpoint from, directly above. It's such an uncommon shot, and the movie has scatterings of unique angles that help it to feel unique in a sea of animated features that can sometimes blend together. Rather than a delicate butterfly coming out, a sharpened fingered green hand shoots from the underground, grabbing Turnip and pulling him by the tail down the hole. Turnip's mews and screeches are chilling as he's dragged below the earth, before Irene snatches him up, carrying him and running away. More mounds emerging from the ground, cutting off her escape as she screams no. They run off into the woods, and there's an interesting dual transition that happens here. First, there's another distinct angle where she runs deeper into the woods, and it doesn't last for even a second, but it's a blur of the trees and the brush in the foreground, and it's as brief as possibly could be. But it's such a unique bridge between scenes, it's the shortest visual effect that has stuck with me the longest. It not only acts as a connection for two scenes, but also is the first signal in the unexpected change in the art style for the movie going forward. The woods themselves get darker and more ominous, with Princess Irene running, shrieking at the animal hybrid ghoulies that jump from the shadows to scare her, and she legitimately may have the best scream I've heard in a cartoon ever. It's appropriate for the moment, but also fantastically overdramatic in the campiest of ways. But what stands out most is the shift in the look of the movie. The original version of Princess Irene was drawn completely competently, but also lacked the understated detail often seen within Disney princesses, resulting in a more plain, basic-looking outline. When she enters the woods, due to the overhanging of foliage, we see Irene in a literal new light, the darkness shadowing her skin and hair, and the drawings of her appearing a bit tighter and more consistent with the change of the shot. She loses herself into the woods deeper, surrounded by some of the most foul, unappealing-looking monsters, repulsive bird, vermin, and insect mixes, and she lies on a rock crying. And the detail here is some of my favorite in the entire film. The detailed creases in her clothes as she weeps into her hands and on her knees. The film's artwork wasn't poor by any means, but it has certainly ratcheted up in quality and excites me to think how it will continue to look going forward. As the beasties surround her, with Turnip bravely attempting to protect her, the monsters are driven off by the song of a young boy who sings about the power of every breath and every note, and the reactions the monsters exhibit, trying to plug their ears and running from the sounds, is pretty funny. With his lantern in hand, he comes across Princess Irene, and this is where the animation is at its peak. Not only do the characters look their best, appearing appropriately childlike and evenly drawn, but the light flickering from the lantern adds a feeling of depth to their faces, and contributes greatly to the nighttime aesthetic of the scene, being some of the best lighting I've seen in quite a while. He reveals that singing keeps the creatures of the forest and goblins away, and her lack of this basic knowledge leads him to surmise since she's so sheltered, she must be from the castle. And we get another quick but uncommonly used shot, rotating from his front to over his shoulder without breaking once. It's wholly unnecessary, but helps these moments stand out through these unusual but very welcome shots. And the concept of using songs as a protective force is an ingenious idea, and would rationally explain why the characters in the movie would be singing throughout their daily lives. I'm surprised it hasn't been used more throughout films in general, but it has great potential to make this movie all the more memorable. As he walks her out of the forest, with the castle protruding from the fog in a gorgeous show of balancing where the characters are and setting the mood with the moon shining on their destination, the boy continues on about how the evil goblins that live under the mines where he and his father work aren't always affected by singing, and teases her how her knowledge of arithmetic will help her be able to at least count the evil goblins should she ever encounter them. I love this innocent play bickering between the two of them. Movies have such a short amount of time to make characters feel drawn towards one another in friendly, romantic, or even antagonistic ways. It's an art to write characters familiarizing with each other in a way that audiences can accept as credible, and this movie achieves that in just a few short interactions. This culminates with Princess Irene offering a kiss to thank him, which makes even Turnip mew and turn bashfully. Maybe it's the flickering of the lantern's light, or the stellar string band setting the mood, but the impending kiss as the two's faces near, and the turning of their heads, making it feel all the more real. This may be my favorite, at least missed kiss, as Princess Irene leaves and learns the boy's name is Curdy. She runs inside the castle grounds, and we get another ambitious shot, following her through various windows that litter the castle walls, seeing her try to explain what happened to her before finally resting for the night, but not before revealing that another castle tower has some strange happenings going on inside of it. The next scene, we see Irene trying to convince the nanny to let her out to play, and the art has changed in a noticeably significant way. Irene's design is the same, but she looks older and more mature. I initially believed this to be due to a jump to a further point in time. Perhaps she had grown up a bit, as she appears taller, her face more shapely than rounded, complete with full lips. But it turns out, this was taking place the next day. It totally clashes with what we've seen up to this point. The sort of simple drawings in the opening scene, and the detailed work of the forest. It isn't substandard, but it feels that way compared to the greatness that was just seen prior. After getting her nanny to leave, Irene discovers a door with a magic insignia, which opens to the glowing tower from the night before. As she reaches the top, she comes across a glowing room, with a figure emanating a bright light before introducing herself as her great-great-grandmother. I understand she's supposed to be this enchanting figure, but she honestly comes across as haunting, through no fault of the artist's own. She's just a very unsettling looking and acting character, with skeleton bone-white skin and an older-looking face, and white hair that extends to the floor. Irene bounds over, ready to embrace her newly discovered family member, before stopping and saying she doesn't have a great-great-grandmother, and her grandmother explains not everyone knows she's there, admitting she's not exactly a ghost, but not real either, but magic in a way. As the entire room around them continues to change to a palace and then a beautiful rose garden. It's so strange, and seems that it could possibly go into a sinister direction, but thankfully, her grandmother claims she's there to help, as she disappears and the room returns to normal. We go to Curdy and his father working in the mines, and Curdy falls through the cave into a cart of rocks piloted by a pair of goblins, and he overhears them talk about their feet being their weak point as they work to build an underground dam. The goblin horde is disgusting looking. The king's bulbous nose constantly running and sneezing, the queen's giant lips and the few teeth they have scattered around their mouths. The rest of the clan are intimidating but dopey, and look like they came straight out of a Ralph Bakshi movie. Curdy sneaks in and listens to the goblin king and queen planning to flood the castle above with the dam they're building, before they're interrupted by the slimy Prince Froglip. We learn that due to the goblins' refusal to live in unison with the world above ground, they were driven into the caves. His slobbering rage and yelling are fun as he stalks back and forth in his black cape. But what's truly disturbing is the relationship with his mother, who relentlessly dotes and compliments him every second she can. Prince Froglip relays that, in addition to flooding the castle, he has another layer to his plan, which is out of earshot of Curdy, who decides to run off to warn his family. That night, the monsters of the forest enter the castle, drawn to the sleeping Princess Irene. Luckily, Turnip and a friendly mouse are there to protect her, the mouse being particularly cute, using a needle as a spear, as they fight off the intruder, allowing Irene to escape back to her grandmother's tower. She appears to the young Irene, creating roses from thin air to act as kindling for a fire, which materializes within a magically appearing fireplace. It's surreal, but I like the idea of this mystical person affecting the world in this way. It feels dreamlike for Irene and the viewer alike, almost unsure of what's real and what's not, only being able to trust Irene's senses, but even then, still not completely confident that she's not imagining this up herself. Her grandmother reveals that she has been spinning a ball of thread that's so fine it's perceptible only to her and will guide her to safety. Curdy sneaks back into the goblin's cave, being tossed around underground waterfalls before coming upon the royal family, who are scheming to kidnap Princess Irene so that Prince Froglip can marry her and become king of the humans. Curdy is discovered, but manages to stave off the goblins by hitting their feet, all but the queen's, who is wearing a pair of stone clogs for just this sort of instance, which is a clever wrench to throw into the fold. While it is a fun idea to see Curdy stomping and smashing the goblin's toes, the art changes yet again, looking more haphazard this time, the detail completely gone, the size and poses of the creature and action varying. It's hard to go between these moments of gorgeous animation to what looks more like concept art, not a final product. And it definitely takes you out of the movie. Curdie is trapped in the corner of one of the caves, saved only by his singing, which never stops being funny to see how the creatures revile at his musical abilities, singing the same song as he did when we first saw him in the forest. Back in the castle, Irene dreams of ascending a cloud staircase into the night sky to a wooden door. I absolutely adore the color of the dark blue sky and the ethereal looking clouds. Just for how beautiful and creative it is, it's my favorite piece of scenery in the entire film. Irene reaches the door and sees her grandmother's image in the clouds, who tells her to follow the thread, which prompts her to wake up and sneak out of the castle. And yet again, the quality in the artwork shifts dramatically, going from the dream sequence where she possesses a blank stare and has the most basic of facial features, to this montage of her escaping into the forest with lush backgrounds and incredible shadowing, and maybe the most impressive scene of her entering the top of the waterfall. It's hard to believe this is the same film. It looks like it's been put together by multiple art studios at the detriment of the viewer's experience. The thread, attached to a ring given to her by her grandmother, leads her into a cave where she helps Curdie escape his rocky prison. They follow the thread and try to escape through the caverns, going over a pit of lava on a walkway, and it's a fun idea for them to try to traverse these obstacles, but they're resolved quickly and without much fanfare or even music to build a sense of tension. It's not only in this scene, but it is glaringly obvious here because of how great this section could be if it were turned into an exciting action scene. They stumble into a hall of sleeping goblin guards, stepping over them until they unintentionally enter the royal goblin bedroom. After accidentally waking the goblins, they follow the thread to safety in another scene that should be more exciting, but ultimately falls short, just doing the bare minimum, which for any movie, but especially this movie in particular, feels like a huge letdown. They return to the castle, but he doesn't believe in the elder Irene's existence, as he goes to warn the king of the impending threat, leaving her in tears. Determined, Irene uses her status as princess to demand a meeting with her father, winking at Turnip that she's not really angered, just putting on a show of sternness to get what she wants, which is to warn her father about the goblin's scheme, who as they speak, are emerging from a tunnel underneath the castle, ready to cause havoc and destruction. Curdie finds the young royal, who he tells to stay in her room where it's safe, only for Prince Froglip to be standing menacingly behind her door in a wicked shot, before closing in on her and fading to black, ending the scene in a wonderfully ominous mood. The castle is in the full throes of battle with the goblins, as the knights drive back the enemies by singing the same song Curdie had been singing earlier, driving them underground. The goblins, only partially defeated, bust the dam open, water overflowing the cave as Froglip threatens to wring Irene's neck if Curdie tries to follow them into the cave. The water sweeps through the castle, taking with it humans and goblins alike, bringing Curdie and Irene to a rock before the edge of the waterfall, underneath darkened storm clouds. But there's no opportunity to celebrate, as Froglip and Curdie fight, attempting to break the young boy's back. She slams his foot, causing him to lose his balance, before a flying kick from Curdie sends him careening to his very likely end. With a moment to rest now, Irene tells Curdie she wants to reward him with the kiss she promised him during their original meeting, and as they lean in, she turns and kisses him on the cheek. A sweet moment that feels perfectly in line with them being kids. They rejoin their families at the castle as the kingdom sings the movie's theme once more. The Princess and the Goblin would be released in 1991 in Hungary, December 1992 in the United Kingdom, and 1994 in the United States, but would be seen as a major flop, making only $2 million against a $10 million budget. It no doubt had the disadvantage of being released against the stiffest competition imaginable, The Lion King, which debuted mere weeks later. But the film has its own issues that, if fixed, could have led it to finding a wider life on the home video circuit, rather than ending up as a hardly known piece of media. The biggest issue is the consistency in the artwork. I have never seen a movie that unintentionally has such a wildly vast array of levels of quality throughout. The backgrounds for the most part are beautiful, but the characters sometimes are of the highest Disney level of standards, and others can look like unfinished productions. It doesn't ruin the story, but does manage to take you out of the film when your mind has to tell itself that these are in fact the same characters in the movie as you were watching just minutes ago. If that's the biggest sin of the film, then the biggest missed opportunity has to be the songs. It's a brilliant idea to make the enemy's weakness being songs, and would give a logical explanation as to why there would be random bursts of singing along the adventure. There could be ballads, fight songs, reflective pieces, but instead, there is only one song, and it's sung multiple times. It feels like a waste of a fantastic premise, and I'm sorry that it was overlooked, because this had potential to be the most memorable aspect of the entire film. There are numerous other storytelling nitpicks that make the film feel less put together than anything Disney, or even Don Bluth, would have released at the time. For instance, the king being the narrator, when he has the fewest screen time of any of the side characters, was an oddity, not contributing anything to the story otherwise. Princess Irene's grandmother appearing to her made for an interesting, mystical portion of the story, but was so vague and didn't provide much out of giving her the string. It could have been better served to give her a larger role. Perhaps that her grandmother had watched over her as a child before the nanny, and when she passed, she continued to watch over her from the afterlife. None of this is to say that any of these ideas would have made the movie any better, but I do believe they would have helped to give the story some uniformity, making it tighter and thus more impactful. The Princess and the Goblin ends up being an enjoyable little adventure film, held back by its own shortcomings, but worthy of being remembered for its cute story, moments of stellar animation, and endearing main characters. In the hands of the right person, this idea could be fleshed out in a way that fixes the weaknesses the film has, and puts a complete product together that will finally attract the attention this movie deserved the first time around. And when that time comes, hopefully, the world will be ready for it.